enhance our coping skills, getting away those old tools that don't work anymore, creating new tools when life brings us events or situations, even developing some coping skills. But when we have a traumatic experience, it doesn't necessarily lead to trauma if I have coping skills. If I'm able to have people I can talk to, process it out, really sit in the experience of what happened so that I can deal with it, then move on. PTSD tends to happen when our body is overwhelmed with the amount of stress and our triggers are coming too fast that we cannot manage it. And so post-traumatic stress, it happens after the traumatic event. And it's called a disorder because our natural way to manage that has kind of gotten a little out of balance. And we can definitely rectify PTSD, but the goal is trying to not let it get to PTSD at first.
That sounds good. Any other thoughts before we play another cut? Anything think you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, cool. All right, we'll play another cut. So you'll see this is gonna take us up through there, I promise. Good show. Love it.
I had to go get there. Mine was more because as a child, I didn't have the best relationship with my mother.
Right.
Like I lived with a lot of different family members.
Okay.
Nothing bad happened to me. I wasn't no molestation, nothing like that.
Okay.
But it was always the feeling that I was kind of unwanted by my mom.
Gotcha.
Because she was kind of like, she would.
Like a feeling of rejection.
Yeah, she would move, okay, now stay with your auntie.
Okay.
She moved now to stay with this person. So as an adult, I started seeing myself self-sabotage in relationships.
Oh,
Because
okay.
it was
Intimate
a-
relationships.
Right.
Okay.
Because it was the thing, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of like, she gonna leave, you know, and even if she wasn't, in my head.
In your head, you were
Right.
preparing yourself with the expectation that it was going to happen.
Exactly.
That became your norm. You grew up with that. That became your
So
norm.
I just got to a point where I was like, something's wrong here.
Right.
You know, instead of always like, well, she did this, she did that.
And when you
Sometimes-
say here, you mean in self.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
pointing directly at myself, saying,
Right.
this is where the problem is starting.
Right here.
Instead of, because a
And
lot
on
of
the
times,
inside.
yeah, I think a lot of times people always want to kind of blame the other person
Externalize the issue.
instead of
yeah.
sometimes taking a look at self. So
That's
I mean,
the easy way to do it.
Yeah. So I,
For sure. Like there was a lot of great points that, like we often mischaracterize trauma. Like I often say on my show, if you're black in America, you didn't experience some trauma. You've been through 2020, you've experienced some trauma, and it looks different. But like everything else, we want to put it in a box. But it is vital that we identify because it's going to affect every single relationship or every single connection that we attempt to have. So we want to be mindful of that.
The part for me was, oh, please, go ahead, Tim.
I just wanted to ask about, you expand on the symptoms of, you know, you usually say, you know, you said disorder.
Let me get you the mic, Tim. Can't hear you, brother. But his question was, can she expand on the symptoms?
Yeah.
Let me jump in here on that cut real quick before we go kind of back to that part. We definitely gonna go through that. The thing that stood out, I'll just throw this out. The thing that stood out to me is me growing up in the South. I definitely grew up hearing throughout our community, you rely on that versus going to therapy. So that's the part that stood out the most to me, the end of that cut, where they were just highlighting that. And to the point where that would actually trump going to therapy quite often. Just the idea of all you need is God, or you rely on the Lord. And this is not me demonizing anything, but just speaking honestly about our community quite often, relying on that. And as I heard them say on that cut, yeah, please jump in. But as I heard them say on the cut, that's not a permanent solution to some type of specific trauma, especially if it's evolved into an actual mental health condition. But we literally, quite often in our community, have to just try to rely on that and say, God, fix you. I'm gonna go here and I'm come here.
Right, so that was something I got a lot of backlash for when that show aired. I got a lot of backlash, me being raised in up north, from, you know, parents that were raised in the Bible Belt of our country. You know, I was raised, and that has been my choice. I mean, to choose God, choose my faith, you know, over everything. But as you evolve as an adult and you deal with real life issues, it's like you have to really be in touch with who you are. That is our faith, to go have faith and to trust another human being that they have the equipment to be able to treat whatever it is that you're dealing with, whether it's trauma or not. So it's like, when I got all that backlash, I'm telling you, I got a lot of people like, oh, so you're not a Christian no more, so you don't believe in God no more? I'm like, what, time out? Hold on now. You know, we gotta deal with some of these real issues, because when people come at me real hard, I ask them a question like, so where is that coming from? Like, are you upset? Are you offended? And if you are, why? Because you're not mad at me. Let's be clear. You're upset about something else. So let's deal with what's really going on. I don't never take that stuff personal. Yeah, so, yeah, I got a lot of backlash for
I
that.
can imagine.
Because you have to be real about it.
No, it makes sense. Milton, we're gonna, definitely get this.
I just want to say, I'm not for the generation before me, but I believe that a lot of them didn't believe in this, because if you think about what they used to do as far as getting big for our regular health, why would you trust them with our mental health? So I believe that a lot of times when that generation before us, they was like, you can't trust it, you can't trust white people.
Right.
You know what I mean? You just can't trust them at all because of the things they used to do to us, to our body. So that's what I believe part of it is. Not just the part as far as religion. I believe it's also, we've been given a template of you cannot trust them with this information. You can't trust them.
No, that makes sense. That's a great thought. So yeah, if you will, Telly, you have something in addition to asking about the symptoms? I know they couldn't hear you.
No, I mean, just.
So you just asked what were the symptoms. So I'll let her answer that, and then we'll come to you. Oh, you want to jump in real quick? Go ahead.
I just want to say that while we were so busy focusing on how we're progressing, he said earlier that his abandonment issues started from him from moving from parent to parent. So he figured his mom was going to be with him. And I can identify with that, because I'm not ashamed to say that I didn't have any friends when I was young, because my dukes were always, I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me.
We got to fight her.
So that is the beginning of it. So we so busy fixing it when we get here. Why don't we try to start it out at the bottom and work things out and start teaching and training and raising people to feel what they need to feel to a point that I'm good with mental health. My daughter's a mental health. That's my baby.
Oh, that's
You just stuck over here.
I know.
Family back in here. Church member there.
You look like sisters though. That's it.
Thank you. That was my point, is that he had that problem long before you got to me or something. So.
Let's get those symptoms out there and
Yeah.
come right here. 'Cause I
So
wanna
there
make
are several symptoms, but there are some trademark symptoms. And some of those symptoms are the hyper-arousal. We're hyper-vigilant. We're very startled very easily, or we get angry. So emotional instability comes from that. One of the other telltale symptoms is avoidance. Avoidance of that trigger, or something that reminds us of that trigger, is one of the tell signs, as well as the notorious flashbacks and nightmares or day terrors, because sometimes it doesn't mean you're asleep when you have these flashbacks, or also these ruminating, intruding thoughts. Those are primarily the telltale signs of active PTSD. And there are a lot of ways, and I want to make sure that we get to just addressing that and seeing what it looks like, especially as we roll over into relationships, because most of our issues with PTSD, as Sincere said, it impacts those relationships, core relationships, work relationships, business relationships, definitely intimate relationships. And what's so, I would say, frustrating about it is that sometimes it's relationship-based PTSD. You know, like we heard on the recording, it was from relationship as a child. And just again, we're just moving around, creating that, or that feeling like no matter how much someone may be thinking they're doing something good for us, trauma is subjective. So it's what I see, and I didn't feel like you gave me enough love or attention. I saw you give them more than me. And so it grows and it begins to build. And so left untreated, it wreaks havoc in our relationships. And one of the telltale signs of someone that may be experiencing PTSD is a lot of failed intimate relationships. And it comes to mind, I think of somebody who had been married 5 times, but they were never diagnosed. But eventually they met the right therapist that kind of put all the pieces together and recognized that that was one of the symptoms that helped them identify them as PTSD.
The therapist saved them after 5 marriages. I figured that person can't be saved at that point. Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah. I know, right?
See, that's why I don't nobody want to say that. I did have a question.
Yes.
And I did have a question on shame-free zone.
Yes. Shame-free zone.
So can being a single parent without proper coping skills cause PTSD?
It could. It could. And it can manifest in a lot of different ways for the parent and the children. So in particular, so we can go both ways. And your question was, without the proper coping skills, being a single parent, can that cause PTSD? Well, again, it's without the coping skills. So now when we know better, we do better. Now that we know that, if we can get some resources into play, we can address certain things. That is why it's critical. Now, it may just be a lot of trauma that's experienced because of the lack of coping skills. Again, it doesn't mean everybody is going to have PTSD just because we've experienced trauma. Everybody, remember, experienced the trauma of COVID, but not all of us have PTSD related to it. And so there is a difference in that. But the key is if it's left untreated, right? If it's left untreated, trauma can roll into depression. It can roll into anxiety. When those things are repeated over periods of time, it can maybe roll into chronic depression, anxiety, even rolling into bipolar, maybe even schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorders, because it's a continuum. So if I have this sore that I got and I ain't doing anything about it, and a week later it's all pussy and I'm still not doing anything about it, a week later now it's all over my hand, because I'm not dealing with it. But when we address it, I still may have a scar at the end, but it's not as damaging and impactful as it could have been. And so.
Camila, I think you had something.